Welcome to the Astrology Show with your host, Kelly Fox. Each week, Kelly will give you access to the current transits that are a valuable tool which provide astrological information to help unlock the potential each of us has through our sun sign. Understanding the current planetary influences each week can help steer us in the right direction to make better informed choices. Sometimes, events in your life may seem completely random, but there is a pattern to the order of these events, one set in motion in part by you, and in part by the planets and stars in the sky and their influence on your life here on Earth. So if you're wondering what's going to happen in your week ahead, if you're going to get that promotion, move to a new city, or fall in love, tune in to the Astrology Show for guidance. It can help you anticipate problems before they occur, give you tools to cope with changes, and help you look forward to the wonderful days ahead. Kelly Fox is a professional astrologer and internet pioneer who launched astrology.com, one of the first and most successful astrology websites. Today, her passion lies with her new site, theastrologer.com, where she brings a modern-day approach to an ancient wisdom. Please join Kelly each week to learn more about how the planets can align for you.
Hi there, and welcome to the Astrology Show. I'm your host and astrologer, Kelly Fox. What a busy astrological week we have this week. Last week it was pretty dull. This week it's pretty busy. The most important and first thing being Mercury finally turned direct yesterday. And we can all breathe a sigh of relief on that one. Also this week, we have Love Planet Venus moving into Gemini, and I'll talk more about what that means for you and your sign. And we have an aspect as well, a pretty serious sort of aspect on Thursday, which is Jupiter forming a square to Saturn. And then on Friday, we have Warrior Mars moving backwards into Scorpio. So, very busy week, very busy. And of course, I'm sure you've heard of Mercury turning retrograde, and it puts fear into a lot of us when we hear that term. No exceptions. Sometimes it's worse than others, depending on where that placement or that planetary influence will affect you. So Mercury turned retrograde on April 28th in Taurus. Now, typically Mercury doesn't like being in Taurus. It's a little bit uncomfortable. Mercury's planet of the mind, and Taurus is more of a kinesthetic or feeling or sensual sign. So when you get those two combinations together, it's a little bit challenging in itself. And then on top of that, the retrograde from April 28th. So it has been causing havoc for many of us. I've heard from quite a few of you about this retrograde period, myself included, and all the things that you're not supposed to do during a Mercury retrograde, like travel and signing contracts. I've been doing all of those things. And anyway, so finally yesterday it turned direct. So our stalled plans can finally move forward again, and anything else we'll just blame on that Mercury retrograde regardless. As I mentioned, tomorrow, Love Planet Venus moves into Gemini, and while it's there for the next few weeks, we might find that our social lives are very busy and stimulating, and it's a time to reach out to others, meet new people, enjoy assortment of activities. Our curiosity is high, it's peaked, and many of us will be eager to try new experiences and learn about different subjects. Again, I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then, as I said, on Thursday, we have Jupiter, planet of expansion, forming a square, which is a challenge to Saturn. Saturn is the planet of karma, responsibility, restriction, obligation. So when you've got the planet of luck and good fortune and hope and optimism, forming a challenging aspect to Saturn, which sort of in some ways has the opposite type of energy. There's definitely some issues going on there, and that is on Thursday. It's like this aspect puts strict limits on all the fun. It's probably the aspect I would call the fun police type of aspect. So anything to do with travel, wanting to expand or being adventurous, which is what we would expect from Jupiter, but Saturn will put the brakes on a lot of things. So it's sort of like with this aspect on Thursday, and it's not just on Thursday, it's basically from now on through probably next show is when the influence of Jupiter forming a square to Saturn will be at the peak. And it's, the other thing about this aspect is it is a measure of our maturity, and that's the involvement of a hard aspect from Saturn. It's like we want to, we're struggling to look at the big and the small, the inner and the outer. So really it's sort of finding a balance between expansion, contraction, big, small, in, out, that type of thing. So it's really, this week is about finding a balance. And then, as I mentioned, on Friday, Mars, warrior Mars, moves backwards or retrograde into Scorpio. And so when Mars does turn retrograde, the fight becomes more of an internal one. Mars is the planet of assertion or aggression, but when it's retrograde, it's more about internalizing. I always think as well with the Mars retrograde, it's about being passive aggressive. And it's not just us, it's the people around us. And again, if you have any planets, and I'll cover this a little bit later on, but if you have any planets at all at the later degrees of any fixed signs, and that's Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, then this Mars retrograde will be bringing up issues from the past and finding a way to express ourselves without being over-the-top aggressive or passive-aggressive. So the other issues that come about when Mars is retrograde in Scorpio, unfortunately, it could be jealousy, because that's an expression of Mars in the negative, and trying to find, again, the word balance between jealousy and assertiveness. So let's take a look at the week, and I always like to start in chronological order. It just helps me think. And the week, I look at my weeks from Sunday through Saturday. So yesterday, and this influence, of course, is still in effect. Yesterday, we had the Sun opposing Mars. And I've just been talking about Mars about to move backwards into Scorpio. And so with the Sun opposing Mars, which is about to turn retrograde in Scorpio, the influence of this is a lot tougher. Now, the Sun is currently in Gemini. Last week it moved into Gemini. And so Sun in Gemini is typically chatty and social and light. I think of it as being a light energy. An opposition usually means someone is opposite us or standing opposed. When two or more planets are in opposition, it means that they're 180 degrees apart from each other. And if you think about it in terms of how does that apply to your life, it's about someone standing exactly opposite you. And sometimes it's not just about confrontation, but it's about projecting back to us. Sometimes the energy of an opposition is about looking in the mirror and seeing what's reflected back. And sometimes we don't like what we see with an opposition, and especially when the Sun opposes Mars. So even though that aspect had peaked yesterday, we are still under the influence of the Sun opposite Mars. And Mars is the warrior planet, but it's very energetic. When I think of Mars, I think of a soldier, or it's a very masculine energy, very testosterone driven. So, the Sun is also a masculine energy. So and also with squares and oppositions, which are known as hard aspects in astrology, It doesn't always have to be negative, even though typically it is, but it's really about finding ways or learning from these experiences, as difficult as some of them may be. A good use of the Sun opposite Mars is any sort of athletic activity or any form of exercise. Now, the Sun is in Gemini. It's opposite Mars in Sagittarius, which is about to move backwards into Scorpio. And so this is tough for the mutable signs because Gemini and Sagittarius are two of the mutable signs. The mutable signs being Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. So if you or anyone you know are born under one of these signs, or you have any planets in mutable signs, this energy might be a little bit more difficult for you when the Sun opposes Mars. So during this time, we will have to face perhaps one obstacle after another, which causes impatience because Mars on the negative is very impatient. It gets frustrated when things don't flow smoothly. But the good news is because Sun opposite Mars is in mutable signs, the mutable signs are very flexible. So if this was in a fixed sign, it would be in fixed signs, it'd be a lot more difficult. But Sun opposite Mars being in Gemini and Sagittarius, it's like finding alternative ways. It's like if you're going from point A to point B, it doesn't have to be a straight line. So Sun opposite Mars will force us to find another way to do something or go around it. So that's the beauty of this aspect. Even though it's a challenging aspect, being immutable signs, it's definitely a lot better. So there might be a lot of blame flying around with this influence as well. And try not to jump into something or make an assumption without all the information first. Confrontations are likely and perhaps arguments. But the good news is the aspect was yesterday and we're ready to move forward. After the break, I will continue with this week's influences. Stay tuned.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
The truth is, you can't change the world if you're broke. I know. I've tried. Isn't it time you turned your life's calling into a profitable, freedom-based business? I'm Michelle Barr. Join me every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern for Sacred Success.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community. The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill, while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Hi, this is Julie Geigel.
And I'm Alicia Isaacs-Howes.
And I'm Catherine Glass.
And we're the Psychic Angel Channelers. You can find us every week here on OMTimes Radio at Angel Talk Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time.
The angels have heard your call and are here to help.
Are you ready to receive?
Remember your magnificence with Angel Talk Tuesday.
Free your mind with OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Hi there, welcome back to the Astrology Show. I'm your host and astrologer, Kelly Fox. We have a very busy astrological week this week. I was just talking about yesterday's aspect of Sun opposing Mars, confrontation, people being a bit aggressive, argumentative, impatient, and also a little bit defensive. But the good news is we get stuff done. So if there's something that needs to happen this week, this is a great time for getting stuff done. Now, the good news is I'm always happy to report that Mercury is no longer retrograde. So Mercury, I can't tell you how many people have a fear of Mercury retrograde. I personally try not to get caught up in that, but it is sometimes unavoidable. And Mercury, when it's retrograde, is not a time to travel or sign contracts or buy any sort of electronic equipment or make any type of major purchase. And I have done a few of those things these past few weeks. Unavoidable, of course. Sometimes you just can't plan things out as hard as you may try. So Mercury is currently in Taurus, and yesterday it turned direct. And this is definitely a big sigh of relief for the fixed signs, or anybody that has any planets in the fixed signs, and that's Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. Now, Mercury turned retrograde on April 28th. And when Mercury is in Taurus, it's not very comfortable being in Taurus. So the planets are in various signs all of the time. And sometimes the planets like being in some signs and not others. And Mercury rules the signs of Gemini and Virgo. So anytime Mercury is in those two signs, it's quite happy. When it's retrograde, a bit of a hiccup, but typically the energy flows. Now, with Mercury currently in Taurus, it doesn't really like being coupled with that sign because Mercury is planet of the mind and communication. Taurus is more of a tactile sign, a sensual sign. It's more about being in the body or feeling or kinesthetic. So when you've got intellectualism coupled with tactile, it's a bit of a hard fit, and particularly because it has been retrograde. So typically when Mercury is in Taurus, our minds might need a little bit more time to think and process the information that's coming at us. Now, the good news about that is it slows us down. It's like we're not quick to jump to a response. We're a lot more methodical and practical because Taurus is an earth sign, and the earth signs are known as being practical and methodical. So it's about taking our time while Mercury is still in Taurus, where it will be until, I'm just looking in my calendar, Mercury will be in Taurus right up through June 12th. So this is a time when it is good to take things slowly. You might have heard of the term, I want to sleep on it before I make a decision. That is definitely Mercury and Taurus types of things. It's like, don't jump to a conclusion. Don't make a rash decision. Take your time to mull things over, to really think about it. You might want to go through all the details before making up your mind. Taurus being a fixed sign right through June 12th, when Mercury is in Taurus, we might have great mental focus, definitely be able to concentrate on the task at hand and see it all the way through to the end. So even though I said that Mercury's not very comfortable being coupled up with Taurus, there are definitely positives to this influence. And that's the thing, that's the beauty with astrology. It's sort of like it forces you to see all sides of a situation. It's not just, even though you have a positive aspect or a negative aspect, it's not all great or it's not all bad. It really is a mix of energies. It'll give you a guideline, and depending on how that influence affects you personally, based off your date, time, and place of birth, it really is about the pluses and the minuses, the dark and the light type of thing. So with Mercury now direct in Taurus, the other thing about that is it's like if we do come to a conclusion of a situation, we might get a little bit too attached because Taurus is a fixed sign, and the fixed signs like to hang on to things. Could be a little bit stubborn. If we make up our minds during this time, we might not want to budge at all. So before you make a firm decision on anything, be sure to have all the information at hand. So it's like mental stubbornness is the downside of Mercury being in Taurus. It might be a good time, or a good test, I guess, is probably the better word, to have a willingness to consider others' ideas and opinions. So that's a good lesson just generally for fixed signs or people with fixed energy. If you need to study at this time, this is really great because we're not going to give up until we have the answer or find something out. Very pragmatic. It's a pragmatic influence. And at this time we're less interested in abstract ideas and more focused on real world concerns. And now that Mercury has just turned direct, retrograde since April 28th, if there's anything that you've been working on that needs to move ahead, now is the time to do it. Any sort of brainstorming or abstract ideas, not so great. The energy is not so great for that type of thing. It's basically more about getting things done. Particularly if it's anything around finances, that could be a special area of focus over the next couple of weeks. And it's a very hands-on type of energy because, as I said, Taurus is very tactile. So anything that you can do with your hands, anything that requires any sort of common sense, this is a great time for common sense, like it is all the time, but more so at this time. We can find a lot of workable solutions as well when Mercury's in Taurus. And as I said, our speech or our thoughts could be slower, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's more about we're thinking more about what we're saying before we actually say it. And so being cautious with our words as well when Mercury's in Taurus. So the next influence we have is tomorrow when Venus, love planet Venus, moves into Gemini. So Venus will be in Gemini through July 17th. And this is great news for all of us, but especially for the air signs or anybody that has any planets in air signs. And the air signs being Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. And so with Venus in Gemini, our social lives could be very stimulating. Gemini is a very busy sign. And so we're going to be very busy during this time, getting out, mixing, mingling. We might find ourselves connecting with a wide variety of people, making new friends and acquaintances, enjoying an assortment of activities. Our curiosity is piqued when Venus is in Gemini. We are very curious. Gemini is a very, very curious sign, likes to know a lot of information coming at you. Many of us might be eager to try new experiences and learn. So at this time with Venus in Gemini, very flirtatious. Some of us might be accused of being fickle. Our affections are likely to shift unpredictably, and many of us might be getting bored very easily, and our mind wandering into the realm of romantic possibilities. Sometimes Gemini and accused of being superficial with this energy, particularly with any sort of social activity. So the good news is if you're single, it could be a time when you're enjoying dating more than one person, because different parts of your personality will emerge depending on who you're with. And I know this from having an from having an accent, and people will sometimes start picking up my accent. It's a bit like the energy of Gemini. Communication during this time becomes more of a priority, and a meeting of the minds will be crucial because we want to share intellectual interests, not only with a partner, but with our friends and any sort of social network. Oh, and on that note, social networking will be really important at this time when Venus is in Gemini. So sharing any sort of intellectual interests will be very important. And it's a good time also for talking through any sort of issues in a partnership, because we might get helpful new perspectives on the situation. Any sort of studying as well is great under this influence. It's like we suddenly develop a love for studying or learning new things. After the break, I'll go through how Venus in Gemini will be affecting your sign.
The best of holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Have you bought into the idea that you have to work hard for your money, that business is hard? I will share some dynamic access consciousness tools to get you out of your own way so you can create a business that actually succeeds. Join me, Simone Millisers, on The Joy of Business at 4 p.m. Mondays Eastern.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network. Are you trying to get from point A to point B and need a little advice? Connect with the counselors at OMTimes Advisors. Whether you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual intuitive, the advisors participating at advisors.omtimes.com were carefully chosen based on their gifts, skills, and professionalism. OMTimes Advisors, connecting you with the best advisors in the business.
What if living didn't have to be so serious?
What if you could move beyond your problems with greater confidence and ease than you've ever imagined?
Throw your labels out the window and join the Irreverent Therapist for practical tips and a very different way of approaching the changes you would like to create.
Marilyn Bradford
and Pam Hodling
have empowered hundreds of people to come out of self-judgment, quit looking to experts, and begin to create the lives they desire.
Join us Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Irreverent Therapist Show.
Conscious media for conscious minds. OMTimes.
Hi, welcome back to the Astrology Show. I'm your host and astrologer, Kelly Fox. Just before the break, I was talking about love planet Venus moving into Gemini tomorrow, where it will stay until July 17th. Now, how will that be affecting you and your sign? Well, for the next few weeks, if you're an Aries, what will be triggered will be the intellect, thought, learning, communication, short trips, siblings, and neighbours. If you're a Taurus, spending and saving money, possessions and attitudes towards money in general. If you're a Gemini, it's going to be about yourself and appearance and your individuality and making changes to your appearance. If there's any sort of wardrobe makeover or cosmetic procedure or haircut, that would be a time to do it when Venus is in your own sign. If you're a Cancer, your subconscious mind, pay attention to your dreams, your intuition. Cancer is an intuitive sign anyway. It's a water sign. The water signs are known to be intuitive, and the water signs are Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. So there's more around paying attention to your gut instincts, anything that's intangible, and also looking at karma. If you're a Leo, when Venus is in Gemini, this is about a time period about friends and acquaintances, groups and clubs and associations and social networks. This will be a great time for connecting with other people. If you're a Virgo, when Venus is in Gemini over the next few weeks, this is about your career. So it's about focusing on career and status and achievements and authority and prestige. If you're up for a career review over the next few weeks before July 17th, this is good news for you. You generally should have a good review when Venus is in Gemini, asking for a pay raise. If you're a Libra, when Venus is in Gemini, it's about publishing and higher education and anything to do with overseas or faraway places, your in-laws perhaps, religion and philosophy. If you're a Scorpio, this is about shared resources, taxes, inheritance, insurance, recycling, sex and regeneration. So if you share a bank account with someone else, this is a time to increase the bottom line, turn red to black. If you're a Sagittarius, when Venus is in Gemini, the focus for you will be on marriage, business partnerships, agreements. So this is a time for getting out there and socializing, particularly if you are single. If you're a Capricorn, this is a time to focus on your health, diet and fitness, daily routines, and pets being of service when Venus is in Gemini. If you have been putting your diet and exercise on the back burner because you have other priorities, now is the time to focus on this area of your life. If you're an Aquarian, this is all about romance, courtship, entertainment, amusements, pleasure, creativity, and children. This is a great influence for you. And finally, if you're a Pisces, the focus for you when Venus is in Gemini is on home, family, parents, and ancestors, connecting with people you are related to. Now, the interesting thing is with Venus moving into Gemini tomorrow, it straight away forms an opposition to Mars. Now, Venus is the planet of love and Mars is the planet of passion. An opposition, as I mentioned before, is someone standing opposed or somebody mirroring your behavior back to you. Now, anytime there's Venus and Mars that are connected by aspect, any aspect, it's always love and passion. So this is about relationships, and romantic relationships in particular. Could be a little bit of a challenge for the mutable signs because Venus being in Gemini and Mars being in Sagittarius. And the mutable signs are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces, or anyone with planets in mutable signs. So while Venus opposes Mars this week and tomorrow, concentrating on work may be difficult for under this influence because it's quite a sensual influence. And, perhaps many of us, our minds are on our relationships and not necessarily on our work. You've heard of the song by the Rolling Stones, I Can't Get No Satisfaction, sort of written for days like these or weeks like this. So some of us might be feeling very hot-blooded, yet a little bit frustrated, or even a tiny bit shy about coming on too strong. Inhibitions can block our passions under this influence of Venus opposite Mars. Some folks might just simply ignore the caution and perhaps be overbearing or impatient in matters of love and affection. That's the flip side. Some of us may not see eye to eye with our partner, whether in business or romance. And with an opposition, sometimes a compromise is hard to reach. So it might be good at this time to take separate ways, at least for this time being. And we have to remember that controlling others isn't the same as loving others. It's one of those times when it's a fine line between love and hate. Venus is the planet of love, but as I said before, everything has a shadow side or a flip side, and the flip side of love could be hate. So take care with that, because Venus opposite Mars, Mars on the flip side is anger, and the flip side of Venus and love is hate. So just be very cautious and patient. And don't permit someone to dominate you or project their faults onto you. Don't own other people's stuff at this time, particularly your partner. Moving on Thursday, Jupiter forms a square to Saturn. So again, challenging for the mutable signs or anybody that has any planets in mutable signs, and that's Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. So Big Daddy Jupiter moves into a tense square with severe Saturn, putting strict limits on the fun. The fun police, as I said before, that's what this aspect is all about. So limits on fun, travel, expansion, and adventure. So they're keywords for Jupiter, but with Saturn forming this tense, harsh square, there's definitely limits to this. And what we want to do interferes with what we should do. There is, of course, a huge difference. What we actually do will be a measure of our maturity, maturity being a keyword of Saturn. Some of us might struggle with the big and the small and the inner and the outer. And of course, as I said in the beginning of the show, it's about finding middle ground. And especially because we have Venus opposite Mars. Again, it's finding the middle ground or compromise. So it's all about finding the balance and finding compromise this week. Also, restricted growth is to be expected at this time. And I always think of like when Jupiter forms a square to Saturn, it's about corporate downsizing. And that might affect the mutable signs more so, either directly or indirectly. And it's sort of like there'd be increased responsibilities, but not the upside, like not a pay raise. It's sort of like we have to take on more due to others' losses. We might be forced to adjust to strict time limits because Saturn is the planet of time. There might be too many rules, regulations, guilt, and even just plain old bad luck sometimes. We need to develop perspective and avoid confusion of mood swings or inconsistent expectations and authoritarian behavior. Some of us might find that our boss is just breathing down our neck. We have a great idea. We want to move ahead with it. We can see the answer or we have the solution, yet convincing the authorities might be a completely different story. So this is a time this is a time for patience or a test of patience. We can see the big picture. We can see how the dots connect, but perhaps our boss does not. So this is definitely a time, a testing time. And I'm using the boss example because anytime I see Jupiter and Saturn connected, it really is about career and work. So it might go a long way towards helping us develop the maturity and patience we need to get through times like these, because Saturn definitely tests our patience. We want to run through the tulips, but we're held back by the obstacle or the fence that blocks us. Saturn is definitely about maturity and patience, whereas Jupiter just wants to run free and go crazy and expand and can see the bigger picture, but Saturn will restrict. On Friday, Mars moves retrograde into Scorpio. Now, Mars has been retrograde in Sagittarius, and it will move retrograde backwards, continue that backwards movement into Scorpio. This is, Mars likes being in Scorpio. As I said before, the planets like being in certain signs, and there's other signs that the planets don't like being in or coupled up with. Mars is the ruler of Aries and Scorpio. So Mars is very happy when it's in Scorpio. It's a very strong placement, but it's going to be retrograde. So that brings up issues of impatience and frustration. And because it's with Scorpio, it's like we know our own strength, but we're being held back. And that ties in with what I just said about the Jupiter forming a square to Saturn. So Jupiter square Saturn is about perhaps doing what the boss says. Mars and Scorpio retrograde is just biding our time and being patient. Now, after the break, I will continue with Mars retrograde in Scorpio and what that means for you and your sign. And then after that, I will tell you what your horoscope is for the week. Stay tuned.
The cutting edge of conscious radio. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
The truth is, you can't change the world if you're broke. I know. I've tried. Isn't it time you turned your life's calling into a profitable, freedom-based business? I'm Michelle Barr. Join me every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern for Sacred Success.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Spiritual, metaphysical, green living, psychic, alternative healing, life coaching. Do any of these or similar terms apply to your business or cause? If so, you are in a niche market with a very specific audience. Conscious Gate PR is the world's leading conscious public relations agency. With a global reach of over 4 million and growing, we offer comprehensive media campaigns to our targeted market. Learn more at ConsciousGatePR.com. Conscious marketing for conscious minds.
Live with medium Lisa Phoenix, Mediumship Messages and Musings, explores mediumship and all things metaphysical. Lisa Phoenix invites you to reach above and beyond your everyday experiences to explore new dimensions in the spirit world. She will do live readings to connect callers to their loved ones in spirit, shares engaging stories and teachings from her own personal experience, and will have intriguing conversations with other mediums, spiritual teachers, and healers to help you understand the metaphysical world so you can connect to these forces in your day-to-day life. Join your host on this magical and metaphysical journey into the world of spirit every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time.
The future of Internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Hi there, welcome back to the Astrology Show. I'm your host and astrologer, Kelly Fox. And just before the break, I was talking about Mars moving backwards into Scorpio. So this will affect all of us, of course, but more so for the fixed signs, and that's Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, or anybody with any planets in these signs. So Mars is the warrior planet, and when I think of Mars, I think of a masculine, very masculine energy. I think of a soldier, a warrior, and Mars is usually an energy that's an initiator, it's a fighter, but when it's retrograde, the fight becomes more internal. Now, Mars goes retrograde, approximately once every 2 years for a period of about 10 weeks or so. And so this Mars retrograde cycle is a little bit more complicated because it involves two signs. So on April 17th, Mars first turned retrograde in Sagittarius, and then it moved backward through Sagittarius, and then on Friday it's about to move backwards into Scorpio. And so what will happen is it will continue to move backwards in Scorpio until June 29th. Now, the key thing to understand about Mars retrograde is that it's not the time to start anything new. And, as I said, under normal circumstances, when Mars is not retrograde, when it's just moving in its orbit forward around the sun, it's about initiation. Mars is typically a starter, a driver. And when it's in Scorpio, one of the signs that it rules, it's extra strong. So it's sort of like when Mars is retrograde in any sign, it's really not the time to start new projects. It's more about retaking something on, or something comes up from the past that we need to deal with now. And because it's Scorpio, Mars being retrograde in Scorpio, it's like dealing with the darkness, or dealing with something that's the underbelly, or something we don't really want to deal with. It's best just to keep it locked in a box under the bed, whatever the issue may be. But many of us, particularly the fixed signs, might find at this time with this Mars retrograde that we're dealing with the murk. And it's a word I like to use around Scorpio when it's a hard energy. It's like, here's a swamp with murk in it, and we don't really know what's in there, and we don't really want to put our toe in there because we're not sure if the toe might get bitten off. This is the time, Mars retrograde in Scorpio, this is when I think of the murky swamp. Now, when it was in Sagittarius is a much lighter sign than Scorpio. Sagittarius is philosophical. It's about religion and ideologies. And sometimes, when Mars, the past few weeks, Mars retrograde in Sagittarius might have been a crisis of faith, or some of us might have been questioning our values and beliefs that we've previously taken for granted, and then all of a sudden now we have to rethink something. In Mars in Sagittarius, it's about adventure, action. So when Mars has previously been retrograde in Sagittarius, some of us might not have been feeling that optimism. Instead we might have been feeling pessimism or bitterness or disillusionment. So when Mars continues its retrograde cycle from Sagittarius to Scorpio on Friday, the energies turn darker still. So it's like there's still stuff to be done, or stuff to be unearthed. And so Scorpio is a very mysterious sign. So it's like digging up the dirt, or getting to the truth of the matter. And so Mars on the negative is about anger. On the positive, it's assertion. So there might be some anger that's directed to things hidden or private. And that's both on the world stage and a more personal level. We might find during this Mars retrograde in Scorpio period, it's like dealing with issues of abuse and power or trauma. It's anything that we can't suppress any longer. It has to come out. And the interesting thing is, because Scorpio is a sign of sex, so Mars retrograde in Scorpio, For some, particularly with any sort of fixed signs or planets, the reappearance of a former lover disrupting an existing relationship, because issues of jealousy, whether warranted or not, is another expression of Mars in Scorpio retrograde. Trying to keep things under wraps or under control, it's not usually very successful. I know it sounds a little bit alarming, but it's important to remember that anger is not always a negative thing. It's better to get something out and be expressive rather than repressing. Now, Mars together with Scorpio is a very passionate energy, and that's positive or negative, it's passionate. So Mars in Scorpio, extremely passionate energy. Now, what the test will be is how we can channel our passion or our anger in the right direction. And it can be a force for good and a force for change. So as I said, everything has a flip side or a shadow side, and we just need to deal with stuff that might have been repressed or pushed down previously. So that's Mars retrograde, and what I want to go through now is your weekly horoscope with all of this, everything that's going on this week, and there really is a lot. There's a lot of big issues that need to be dealt with, things that are going on. This is not a time for repressing. This is a time for illumination, or this is a time for confronting, but not in a negative way, but really looking at something that stands opposite or obvious to us. So, if you're an Aries, rushing around doesn't get anything done faster this week because Mars, your ruling planet, moves backward into Scorpio. So if you rush into something, it will only lead to careless mistakes. Just because Mercury also is direct, we still are under the influence of the retrograde. So double check any sort of travel arrangements and try to keep things tidy, especially your desk at work. With the Jupiter forming a square to Saturn, your boss might be breathing down your neck. And stay on top of important details because they might be elusive at this time. If you're a Taurus, seek expert advice over any financial matters this week. Don't think that you know it all. There could be complex legal matters to overcome relating to the family or to money, and you can't do this alone. If you're a Gemini, Venus arrives in your sign to lighten your mood, but infighting between you and your partner and your family grates on your nerves. It's not your job to play peacemaker, but then again, somebody has to. If you're a Cancer, you might be overdoing it. You can't fix everything, and you can't do everything. You can't take on the world alone. Lighten your load as much as you can this week. Delegate what you can and gently say no to the rest. If you're a Leo, who are you trying to impress with all that spending? Recklessness in finance or in love could be your undoing this week. Give yourself a talking to and try to take a more grounded and responsible approach. If you're a Virgo, Mercury, your ruling planet, turns direct yesterday, which helps you to stand your ground against an onslaught of family criticism. It's most definitely their issue, not yours, so don't let it affect your confidence levels. If you're a Libra, you're going round in circles trying to figure out a particular problem, but you're making it too complicated. Follow your gut instincts to find a solution. Guidance may also come from your dreams, so pay attention. If you're a Scorpio, Mars, your ruling planet, moves backwards into your sign and underlines the fact that friendship and money don't mix. Rows over finances hinder your social life, but try to keep your temper and give a friend the benefit of the doubt, Scorpio. If you're a Sagittarius, Venus switches signs this week and boosts the loving support you can expect from your partner. Colleagues, however, are a different matter. Keeping the peace at work could be tricky as the pressure mounts, particularly with that Jupiter square Saturn. Jupiter being your ruling planet. Capricorn, you're struggling to manifest your goals and your dreams this week, but a positive mental attitude will help no end. If you're thinking negative thoughts, that's what you're attracting into your life. Practice gratitude instead. If you're an Aquarian, your hard work on behalf of a charity or a community has not gone unnoticed. But as your workload increases, it's time to look for some extra help. Don't feel that you have to go it alone. Now, yours is the sign of the humanitarian, so this is very important for you. And finally, if you're a Pisces, open and honest communication is needed within your relationship, especially where your respective career goals are at odds. Keep talking and you will be able to find a win-win compromise which works for both of you. Now, Pisces being a mutable sign, and there's a lot of mutable influences this week, so there's a lot of shifting and changing of the sands. So that's good news. Nothing's set in stone or fixed, but that's very good news for you Pisces and the mutable signs. So there we have it. Lots of activity going on this week, lots of planetary energies, with Venus moving into Gemini, Mars moving into Scorpio. There is a lot going on. Take care on Thursday with Jupiter forming that square to Saturn. Don't let things get the better of you, and be respectful, I guess, of authority and your boss, I think would be my parting words of wisdom for this week's show. Anyway, thanks for joining me. This is The Astrology Show, and I'm your host and astrologer, Kelly Fox. Tune in for next week's show.